questions as
This meeting is being recorded.
there we go. And Mark Bryans, it's yours.
Just thank you, Sue. And I appreciate the invitation. I appreciate the league's good work. And for me to be able to participate in that in some small way is very much appreciated on my part. Thank you. One correction in my introduction, I'm the circulation director, not the advertising manager.
Oh, so sorry.
I'm in charge of distribution of the newspaper and the sales. What I had done, I had met with our publisher, Nathan Alford, and managing editor, Craig Cloesy, in anticipation of this call because they're traveling today. And we brainstormed a few thoughts that kind of addressed some of the points that you raised in your conversation with Nathan and our exchanges, to try to speak to where we are today, where we're going, what things aren't going so well, what things seem to be improving. So in that vein, I just have a few notes, and we can, please interrupt me at any point. We can chat through some of those things. I did read through a large part of the materials that you shared with me, Sue. I did not get through the 133-page document, but I got about a quarter of the way into it. And I appreciated the background. I'm so impressed that the league has taken this challenge on to help support the newspaper industry, the media, to be able to, and I was reading through one of the documents, and it said it addresses the exchange of ideas and opinions. But without newspapers being the driver for that, there really isn't a whole lot of quality conversation that takes place. So it's important to us. It's obviously important to the league. Some of our challenges, as all of you probably are aware, a few years ago, we started losing retail. Part of that was driven by a decline in circulation in our industry. So they were seeing, if they put ads in a newspaper, those ads were being seen by fewer eyeballs. So they had less value in the eyes of a retailer. We've lost Kmart, JCPenney's, Macy's, Safeways when they combined with Albertsons. Those were all very substantial revenue streams for us. Classifieds which was a very strong one for us, was depleted by the advent of Craigslist. So there's an old saying in our business that I learned in my first few months, I think some 36 years ago. Content is king, but revenue floats the boat. So as that revenue goes away, it added significant challenges to be able to operate in a traditional fashion. So you're seeing all across the country these iterations of dropping print days, going digital, shrinking the number of pages in the paper in a way to save costs, because when the revenue stream dries up, you got to pay the bills, right? So as the revenue decline has occurred, which is affecting us pretty significantly, we have become more reliant on subscriptions as our revenue stream in the traditional newspaper format. So our subscription rates increased. I think they were $13 when I got here 8.5 years ago. And I think our average is now just under $26. So they've doubled in 8 years. Shouldn't be a surprise to you. The circulation revenue in the traditional newspaper portion of our operations, circulation revenue now generates the most revenue of all our divisions within the company. So it's pretty significant. But we continue to see and realize circulation declines. You know, I'm of that group that grew up with newspapers. I'm on the older end of the spectrum. And those are who predominantly read us. The subscribers that we have today are generally up in the retirement age or older. And we've had a devil of a time trying to attract younger readers. They don't care for the print product. They didn't grow up with it. They're not accustomed to it. It's an old-fashioned way to get news. So they rely more on social media to get their news. The problem with social media is that a good portion of that is unreliable. It's unsubstantiated, not fact-based. It's more of somebody's opinion on what occurred somewhere. So that's unfortunate, and that's what they believe the news is. And then we've gone through this period in recent years, 6 years maybe, of the fake news. And that has hurt small town newspapers like ours. You know, you have the Foxes and the MSNBCs, you know, on the national stage that have given the media a bit of a black eye because there's a perception of bias in those broadcasts. And so then all news becomes biased, whether that's the case or not. And it doesn't matter whether you're a metro newspaper in Los Angeles or small town rural newspapers in Eastern Washington, Northern Idaho. So those have made it difficult, and probably mostly in the last few years, 2-3 years, that has created deep fissures in how people look at news, and it makes it difficult to have a reasoned conversation about the media, about religion, about education, about law enforcement, you name it. There's whether they're based on facts or not, there's deeply held beliefs that are rigid in more and more of the population. And that's unfortunate because it makes it very difficult to have the open exchange of ideas that we're looking for. That's the foundation of the media. So those, from a news standpoint, those seem to be our most significant challenges. On a circulation standpoint, in my area, labor challenges have bitten us hard since the beginning of the pandemic. And you drive around and you see new now hiring signs everywhere. We have positions on the Palouse, Moscow, and Pullman staff position, paid positions, benefits, the whole thing. And we haven't been able to fill 4 slots in 2 years. Somebody might try it out and they quit within the first couple of days. So we wind up right now, we have 2 people running all of our operations on Moscow and Pullman. So they don't get any days off. And it's been like that for quite some time. So it's been a challenge. It has forced us to move more and more of our circulation to mail delivery because we're unable to attract and retain carriers. So just at the end of January, January 31st, was the last time we delivered any of the rural routes in our circulation area in 8 counties. So outside of Moscow and Pullman and Lewiston, Clarkston, and Stoughton, we still go to Pomeroy, we still go to Anatone, but everything else up the Clearwater River, down the prairie, out in rural Latah or Whitman counties, now comes through the U.S. Postal Service. And that was just for a longtime newspaper fellow and a longtime circulation manager. That was just and is gut-wrenching to have to do that. But there's no other way for us at this time to be able to get a newspaper delivered. We are taking advantage of the Postal Service program called Exceptional Dispatch. And what that allows us to do is, through some organizational and bureaucratic processes, we're able to put newspapers in mail tubs or mail sacks. And we have a driver that will go out to Colfax, Palouse, Garfield, Potlatch, Deary, Moscow, or Deary, Beauville, up the Clearwater. We drop those mail sacks off at the post offices in the middle of the night. And then those newspapers will go out in the same day mail with the postal carrier, which is good, but it doesn't come out in the morning. Many of the folks don't get their mail delivered to their boxes until early afternoons in most cases. So we're still able to deliver a print product, and we're able to do it significantly less costly than we can do by sending trucks out to those areas that drop the bundles for the carriers and then paying the carriers to do the routes. So it is, unfortunately, we've had to go backwards. You know, before carriers came along, I don't know, 75 years ago, the papers were delivered by some form of mail. Now we're back to that, which is, you know, it's like I mentioned earlier, it's just gut wrenching for an old newspaper guy. but it is what it is today. So that's kind of a summary of our challenges and where we're at. Now I'm welcome to open it up and we can jump into things that you would like to discuss.
That's great. And I'm suggesting that when people have questions, please ask them directly, making it more of a conversation, allowing people to complete their thoughts though, please. Libby, you just showed up on the screen. I thought you might have something.
I don't see a chat. I don't see a chat room, so I guess I'll just. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay.
yeah, and Libby, I think we need to raise our hands. Just use that symbol.
Okay.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
just gonna
either
raise my
raise your
hand on the
hand or
screen.
use the symbol.
Yeah.
And
Okay. Okay.
yeah,
I think I
you're
have the-
on.
Okay. I would like to know how it was decided which hills in Pullman of the 4 hills would continue to have their papers delivered and which ones would go 100% virtual.
I'm not sure that I fully understand your question.
Well, when I was told again that I would not have my paper delivered to my home, I assumed that was the blanket policy in all of Pullman. But a lot of my friends who don't live in my neighborhood are still getting the newspaper.
Yeah, that is, yes, you're right. I understand it now. Thank you.
Yeah.
We do have some routes in Pullman and some routes in Moscow that we have been unable to find carriers for. Some of those routes are being delivered by the 2 staff members that we have up there, but the other routes that are above and beyond what we have the capability to deliver, we have moved to mail. Our
Yeah.
intent is any of those routes that reside in the city limits of Moscow and Pullman, we will eventually, hopefully, get a carrier on those routes contracted so that we can return to door delivery.
Well, I don't get it in mail. I get it over the internet.
Well, you have a choice of taking it via the mail or taking it via
And it
the
would be the same day. I would get it the same day.
minus Sundays and postal holidays. Yes, would come.
I don't remember being offered that option. It was just, guess what? You don't have a carrier and we're just going to go online. And I want to tell you, Mark, it's not entirely a bad thing because our deliveries here were so erratic that sometimes it was 9 o'clock before the paper came, and that just didn't work with my schedule. So now I can get up at 6:30, click on the internet, and I can read the paper. So I'm not complaining. I just wondered why we were singled out in my neighborhood to not get the paper.
Well, that's a common perception. It is.
Yeah.
We've divided up our circulation area into delivery geographic areas that is for a carrier, right? And
Yeah.
if we don't have a carrier for it, then none of the people on that route
Yeah.
are going to receive delivery. So we didn't single you out.
No,
Just
but
so
it seemed like
happens-
it was this hill, but maybe it
Right.
wasn't the whole hill here.
I see.
Okay, I'm done.
Thanks for the question.
About that. Now, others, I have to admit, I'm not seeing how to get hands. So
Okay.
I
whoever,
didn't know how to get hands either.
oh, thank you. You stick with me. But go ahead. Do you have anything that,
Okay, I'm just gonna, yeah, you can do hands, but I don't want to explain at this
Good.
point. Just raise your hand. It's
There.
all good. So anyway, Mark, my question is just in general, do you feel like people are finding out about the online service? It's being better utilized. We don't want to lose our local paper. We just don't. And so is that something that is catching on, do you feel? I don't know if you have data on how many folks are accessing that opportunity.
I have some data for you. Currently this morning, we had 1,171 online only readers at the Tribune and just under 500 at the Daily News. A little over a year ago, I think it started in November of 21, we were accepted into a program that Facebook at the time was helping newspapers become digital savvy so that we could market to people who want to consume their news digitally versus the print product. And that was, I would have to say, and Nathan would agree, that that was a master's course in learning how to get your programs in alignment to be able to allow that to, you have the good foundation that when you start marketing to those folks, it works, right? And that was a 10-month program that 5 of us were investing 40 man hours a week in, and those were Nathan and Craig and, you know, they were Butch Alford and department leaders to learn this. And we had to go out and accumulate software services that would help us be able to market. And then we had to learn the marketing. And part of the reason that Nathan or Craig aren't with you today is that they're traveling to Florida to the Pointer Institute. They have put on a program called Table Stakes, and it will teach us how you analyze the data that comes back, how the news is being consumed. So we can focus more on the things that people want to read and maybe figure out a different way to present the other parts of the news that aren't well read, or maybe eliminate them. So we've, in the past year, I think we grew 400 and plus subscriptions on the digital side for the Tribune, and we haven't yet marketed for the Daily News. So it's whatever we're getting there is completely organic. But we expect as the country, the nation, worldwide, I guess, more and more of our readership is going to come in the form of digitally. So they're going to read our website through the e-editions. The e-editions, I was just reading a note from a fellow today that Nathan forwarded me. He lost his opportunity to have a print version and switched to reading us online. And he really likes the e-edition because he can zoom in and read the sports scores and the agate, and the things that are in the print product are so small that you need 3 pairs of glasses to be able to read it. That really suited him. It was another pleasant surprise, like you, Libby, where you now can read it digitally at 6:30 in the morning if you want. He likes to be able to read the small print stuff that he couldn't read before. So there are benefits, certainly.
So Mark, we have a question. I don't know if Sue can see this. I'm sorry to butt in, Sue.
Please.
But there's a question about percentage of readership from Pullman.
I don't have a percentage for you. I can tell you that the Daily News is very strong on the Latah side and less so on the Pullman side, Whitman side. And when we delivered the Spokesman Review up until the end of the year, the Spokesman Review is very prominent on the Whitman side and very low on the Latah side. So they're Spokesman, there's a lot of tie to the university. So there was they had a fairly strong readership here until, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, and then it began to drop off pretty sharply over the years. I think when they finally made the change to mail at the end of end of December, we were down to delivering 336 of their newspapers in the entire Palouse market. So I know that doesn't speak to the percentages, but I would say that the Tribune dominates the Whitman side, probably 66 to 33% Daily News. And I'm just off the top of my head, I could be way off, but I'm happy to document that and send it to you, Sue, and you can distribute it to the.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess, Mark, that begs the question, is that, do you think that comes from a sense that there's more news coming from the Latah County side versus Whitman County? I mean, why do you think that's happening? What's your theory? Because I do hear that there's a lot more Moscow news than Pullman news in the paper. So curious your point of view on that.
Well, I think I'm just hypothesizing here. So if you'll forgive me for not having something to support it. The Moscow newspaper used to be called the Idahonian, and it more aligned with the Latah side back in those years,
Mhm.
geez, 25 years ago, I think. And then it was changed to the Moscow Pullman Daily News to try to have a little more breadth in the distribution area. And I don't think that, you know, even from a retail standpoint, there's less retail advertising on the Whitman side than there is on the Latah side. And I can't tell you what the breakdown is on coverages between the two cities, but I would probably agree with you that it is more Latah centric than it is Whitman centric.
Yeah. Can I just add something? When I open the paper in the morning, it feels like there's no reporter following what's going on in Olympia. The reporters are following what's going on in Boise. And it's so lopsided that sometimes I'm irritated because I think, I know our legislature is in session and people are working really hard. How come we're not getting any coverage
Yeah.
of what's going on in our state capital?
Fair question, but I think it's probably mostly always been that way, or at least in my association with the Tribune. The state reporting, we've had a State House reporter, William Spence, for
Mhm.
many years, and we would put him up in an apartment down in Boise so he could cover the legislature, but he retired. Now, one of the things that we've been doing to try to continue our coverages is that we partnered with the Nampa newspaper, and we share the cost of a political reporter who resides in Southern Idaho. We don't have, apart from AP, I don't think we have any connections on the Washington side that we can pull those stories out of what's going on in the legislature there.
Well,
Mark, remind me how many employees say are at the Daily News now, and maybe as much as 5 and then 10 years ago.
We have moved in the last few years, many of the support positions that were working at the Daily News, we now incorporated, like page design, for an example. We had a page designer here and we had a page designer at the Daily News. One page designer in either of the properties is capable of doing both of the newspapers. So we eliminated those background or support positions. So I think the Daily News is probably down to 8 individuals, a couple of sales reps, some reporters, a photographer. The editor, the managing editor, is now overseen by our Craig Cloesy in Lewiston. So, and then we have Craig Stasko, who works on more of the opinion type stuff. So counts maybe 8 or 9, I don't recall. And it was probably 10 years ago, maybe double that.
Okay. I would have predicted double that. What will it take to bring more reporters, no matter how the delivery system is?
Well, the short answer is money.
Mhm.
So how we're addressing that is Nathan Alford has been very good at spinning off and creating new revenue generating divisions that aren't news or journalism related, but they help fund the company so that we can continue that mission. So we expanded a direct mail operation. So if you're a Politico and you're running for office and you want to send postcards out to your constituency or try to drum up support, we can print and mail those postcards. Anything that you might get in direct mail now at your homes, we can do that here, whether it's magazines or postcards, letters, everything in between. We also, we had been doing a small amount of commercial printing on our press. We expanded that significantly in 2019 when we purchased a commercial. God, I can't talk all of a sudden. Hold on. We purchased a commercial printing company in Spokane Valley, called Griffin Publishing. We purchased that in September of 2019. We purchased the building and
Told you instead. Hey,
was there a question there? Or can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
We're good. We're good.
All right. Thank you. So we purchased that company and moved the actual printing from the old press that was in Spokane down and run it on our high-end press. And then we leased out the building to Coeur d'Alene Windows, McVeigh Windows. So we now have a revenue generating piece of property in Spokane, and we bought the clients. So we've been printing those goods, and we've of course built up revenue base from that. And we've been marketing heavily to try to add more clients on the commercial print side. This last year, we added more equipment to our press that allows us to print on craft quality paper, the brown paper that you'd find like a grocery bag is made from. We can print on our press branding or logos, and we rewind that up on the end of the press onto another big roll, and we can take it out to another piece of equipment, and we can cut that down into smaller rolls and smaller lengths for companies to use as packaging fill. So if you ordered a car part from Napa because they didn't have it in stock and it's shipped to your home in a box, if you look in there, sometimes it's packed with the plastic pillows in there to keep the product from shifting around and getting damaged in the box. Well, we've created a environmentally friendly way to be able to get into that packaging by producing on completely recycled stock, using soy inks, using chemical-free plates. Even our electricity that runs the equipment is powered by the hydro power up and down the river system. So that is something that we just launched a couple of months ago, and it's already starting to make a little bit of a stir. We haven't announced it yet, but we just landed a significant client for their Northwest operations, and you'll probably see something about that in the newspaper soon. If you've been in Lewiston, you may have seen the huge digital video boards that are in our a pair of them are in our parking lot. There's a couple across on 21st Street across from the Albertsons store, up on Thane in the Orchards next to the Rose Hour store, and now most recently on Snake River Avenue near where CHS Primeland is in the new Groundwork Brewery. Those full digital boards aren't found anywhere in our area, and many of the advertisers are moving their spending to digital video rather, excuse me. So that opened up an opportunity for us to generate revenue. We already have the ad builders. We have the infrastructure in place. So it didn't, other than the cost of installing the boards and the boards themselves, that investment was pretty significant. Those cost us about $200,000 per location. But we are generating sufficient revenues for a good ROI on those. Now we intend to expand onto the Palouse in a couple of key locations, but we have to work within the structure. The zoning structures are a little different up there than they are down here. So we keep whittling away at it, trying to get our foot in. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name's Nick Lovrich, and I'm a political scientist. So I'm really interested in the role of local newspapers and politics. So one of the things the league did recently was this wonderful study on local newspapers and their disappearance, and we're going to try to document what difference it makes on voter mobilization to have a local newspaper or not, and also to document the impact of having a local league present or not in the county. So that's one thing. But I remember not too many years ago, we were talking about trying to create legislation, state legislation, maybe federal legislation that would treat a local newspaper as a utility, that it would be an essential part of sustaining the civil society in any community is this local newspaper. And I was hoping that would go somewhere, but it doesn't look like anybody's taken up that idea and run with it. For example, if a Walmart decides not to advertise in your newspaper, they should have had a tax break or a benefit for advertising in the newspaper, not just make a simple calculation on how many readers and are they the right demographics. So do you have any update on efforts to get legislation to promote measures and policies that would sustain local newspapers as opposed to watching them go away?
A couple of years ago, I believe, right on the tail end of the pandemic, there was legislation introduced at the national level in DC to provide tax incentives to advertisers to use their local newspaper, radio station, TV station. And then that went, I don't think it ever got out of committee, even though it was pushed pretty hard. And then it was resurrected again, just, I don't know, sometime in the last 6-9 months. But I haven't heard any more coming out of Washington on, or our industry, newspaper industry association hasn't said anything about it recently. So I'm assuming it has died in committee again. I remember when this was first introduced, and the department heads were sitting around the conference table in one of our weekly meetings. And when that was first put out there, there was a bit of a cringe for the leadership of the newspaper, because in the onset, it sounded like we were getting into bed with the government, which is not exactly what newspapers are designed to do.
Right.
Even though we have the First Amendment, it was, at least in my interpretation, it was that the government couldn't censor a newspaper, was part of that. It didn't say that it had to support them. And to have someone funding you that you're supposed to be reporting on, sometimes there's a bit of a crossing a line there. So I haven't heard any more about it. And it was the way they were going about it, and I think they must have gotten good feedback from the association, is that you can't actually put hands money in the hands of the newspapers. You got to find another way to incentivize other people to use you so that you're not beholden to the government.
Well, nonprofit organizations, are having the same relationship with the government. Really, we need to have people able to deduct from their taxes contributions to charitable nonprofit organizations, and local newspapers, from my reading, are essential to the democratic process. And the League of Women Voters is about making democracy work. So we can't just sit by and watch as newspapers vanish off the scene of and we do lobby in the legislature. So if there's any interest in having an initiative in Washington and in Idaho legislatures, we should probably know what you're thinking and see if we can support some of that, at least getting information out about the existence of attempts to get local newspapers some support.
Amen, Nick.
Yeah, I can't speak on behalf of the Alfreds and that particular issue. I think we were wait and see mode to see if anything was going to happen with it. And so far nothing has, but it might be worth arranging a sit down with the leadership of the newspaper and having that discussion. It's not something I can speak to here.
So Mark, I was on the very first, editorial. I don't even remember what we were called. This was back in 2000. And we met with what was it, advisory board.
Yes.
Yep.
And so we got input into the operation of the newspaper. Is that still a functional group?
Yes, it is. It went away for a few years, and then it was resurrected again this year, as a matter of fact. And I think we're in the 5th or 6th month of those presentations, and I think it's a 24-month term for those folks in the community to sit on the panel or the committee and hear how the newspaper works and how we go about doing what we do, and then provide us feedback on how we could do it better potentially.
So is there an even distribution on that committee between Whitman and Latah County?
I can find out. I know we have folks from the Prairie and the Clearwater, but I don't recall what the participation is from the Palouse. But I'll find out and I'll send that to Sue as well.
So I'm just,
Larry
this
Cox has
is,
had his hand up for a long time, Trish.
oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Larry,
Yes,
go.
thank you. I'll put my hand down. Thanks, Libby, for catching that. Any rate, my question mark was on sustainability. And I noticed that there's a reduction in advertising overall, especially in Whitman County and Pullman. What efforts are you making to increase advertising? You know, often I like to see the advertising to find out, who's got a sale, what a merchant is presenting, etc. And how does that affect the lack of advertising affect coverage of Pullman, which has already been addressed, but also sustainability?
We have had some turnover in our sales staff on the Palouse, which is detrimental to our building relationships and being able to develop the advertising base. But the woman that we have up there now, her name is Lisa Horner, and she's awesome. And she spends quite a substantial amount of her time in Pullman to try to develop it. But once you lose something, it's hard to get back. It's easier to sustain it than it is to reacquire it. So we're having to fight the stereotypes, and many of the things that I mentioned in the onset of the meeting here. It's a struggle. The small mom and pop stuff, which is mostly what is left in our area, they can't spend enough money to make up for the big box store losses. Their clientele is small, their revenues are small, and they're going to have a limited amount of a budget to be able to spend toward advertising in whatever form they choose. So yeah, it's been an issue, and I wish I had better news for you, Lawrence.
I have a question. So the league is having a civics art contest, civics and environment art contest for children 3rd grade through 12th, I believe. And we did this last year, and we didn't get any coverage from the newspaper at the awards ceremony. We thought that maybe we would. I believe they were contacted. This year, we're doing it again and trying to make it bigger. It's all on our webpage. I was contacted by a reporter saying that she would like to interview somebody about that. So I passed that on to the person in charge, and that person contacted that reporter, and that reporter sort of just passed her off to someone like, I don't know what she was called, but she wasn't a reporter anyway. So I don't know what they're going to do, if they're going to put something off of our webpage in the newspaper, which would be great. I mean, if we could get that, that'd be great. But how would we get a promotional piece in the newspaper? Because I think it's fairly, you need to have participants to make these things successful. It certainly is local news, and it was really successful last year. And 2, how could we get a reporter there to report on it so that it's promotional material for the following year? So we'd like to have somebody come to the award ceremony and see and experience what this kind of a program can do for civics education. And if we don't educate our young people, well, part of the reason we're in the situation we are politically is because civics has been fairly weak for the last 30 years. Why not?
And I asked that it be run in the paper today, Bobby, and there was nothing under news briefs, 0 today.
Yeah, the individual that was passed on to was a news clerk. And so a little disappointing, and but it ties in so beautifully to the purpose of the league and what's so important about civic education and voting and all of that. So anyway.
Well, let me apologize that you're disappointed. I'll give you a piece of advice for what it's worth. If you're calling in about trying to get something in the paper and you're speaking with a news person and you use the word promotional, they're going to want to bounce you to the advertising side, who means that you're going to be charged for putting something in the newspaper. So stay away from the words marketing or promotions. They really have a stalwart attitude toward, they aren't, the news side is not a marketing side.
But Mark, for instance, they reported that you were going to be speaking to the league today. I'm the person who sends this stuff to the Daily News. So I feel badly when somebody decides, well, that's not newsworthy, or we're not going to put it in. We'd like to know how these decisions are made. We didn't say anything about promoting the arts contest. We just wanted it to be announced to the public so people could start submitting their applications, which we're prepared to take on now. We've got a team in place. We don't understand why sometimes they run what we send them and other times they don't. Because I send them to Craig. Every single one goes to Craig, and then news briefs. That's the second address that I use.
I got an email from Emily Pierce, a reporter at Pullman Moscow News, wanting to write an article about the visual arts competition. And I forwarded it to Carolyn, saying, here's a chance. So something is happening.
Yeah, and we got really excited about that, and that Emily reached out to us, which was very cool. But then it got passed on to this other person, and it doesn't look like we're going to get an interview. So it was just a little bit of a twist in what we expected. Yeah, that's all.
What is the application deadline?
31st of March for the art show. For the art.
So someone would have to submit that they want to participate in the event by March 31st.
That's right.
Okay.
No, that they actually have to have their artwork in to us by March 31st.
Okay, so if we back up from there, do they have to submit something in advance to be considered to be part of the contest?
No, it's just that we launched.
Except I have no volume. I can't.
Somebody
hear anything.
mute, please.
Lennis, you need to mute.
One at a time.
Oh,
we launched our theme on President's Day, and that is a little bit significant for us because it's President's Day. So they have a month and a half to do their artwork, but we also are offering civics education programs to students. And so that's something that is a big outreach, that a little bit different than we were doing last year, is that we actually have a program that will do the educational part of this theme that will encourage the students to do their artwork from. So it's more important, to get students and their parents to understand we have this offering, and then they can work on their art. So it's not just March 31st. It's so, and the other big thing that I would love to see is somebody doing something when we go to do our reception with these student artists at the library. They're so excited when they present their artwork and when they get their awards. And last year, nobody showed up. And these children are just so excited. And the things that they said, their comments were amazing. These are little civics-minded children, and this is what we need to encourage. So that's my take. So I'll mute myself. Thanks.
I would also like to add that we've submitted this program to the State League of Women Voters for an award this year.
The reason I asked about the timeline is that Craig is traveling and won't be back until Monday. So it's going to be a week before I can chat with him about it. I have no sway over the newsroom, and I wouldn't, for me to go to someone else's staff member and say, you need to do this, creates internal conflicts that I want to try to avoid. So it's, I want to.
That is the problem.
Yeah, Mark, we so appreciate your position. And, unfortunately, here you are, and here we
Yeah.
are.
I got big shoulders.
And I'm glad. And yeah, we really appreciate even being here with us. So,
So what I'd like to do is on Monday or maybe Tuesday morning after Craig is in and been caught up a little bit, pull him aside after our managers meeting and say, here's what's going on with the league in regard to their civic art contest, and kind of give him idea of how it went from Emily and got bounced backwards and hasn't been in the paper yet. And maybe it will be by the time I have the conversation with him, but I'll keep an eye out for it. But that's my plan anyway, and I'll carry through with that.
Thank you.
I have worked with your staff at the Daily News and at the Trib for, I'm going to say, probably more than 40 years. And I do know that they need good ideas. I will personally work better with the organizations that I'm doing because I know what that reporter is thinking also. They need to stay middle of the road. Even our group, who has learned from newspapers for years, for decades, doesn't realize that today's students are not as situated within a community, this is a starting spot. So sometimes we have to seem a bit helpful, but again, not pick the avenue that they travel to make the story. And I think I've had good luck. I've been lazy for the last several years on getting deeper involved. But I believe that we as league will get the respect we deserve and need, both from our information that Nick brings out so well in the political scene, but in our way of reaching young people with civics. And I'll take part of the responsibility for not getting those releases out at a certain time to a certain person with probably a little bit different attitude, but I don't get excited very often on things. So I can talk to reporters a little bit better about, you all, this is going to work well. This is a big deal. And I don't expect them to realize it's going to be a good big deal and that we're not just trying to get our names out. League is not like that. And I can't really name a group in Pullman that I feel has any kind of special attention from the newspaper. I'm sure those, and I say young people positively, are trying to do the style of journalism that I taught most of them. And I want them to continue to think on their own, but to accept material and ideas and from other groups. So I know I personally will work harder on doing just that. Not count on something one time. And I think I'm going to encourage our group to work together to put together with any of our big items, which we have a handful, and put together a plan of providing information and not just one hope and be disappointed. The Daily News, I should say the company right now has a Pullman young person, Laura Guido, and she is doing the material from the legislature. And my husband just passed me this note saying, this is one of his former athletes, but she's doing a tremendous job with that. It seems to me that League and others, we might be able to get a grant to have somebody in that area of the state writing for the Daily News Trib company about the legislature. Trib is paying for Laura's, but it's an interesting idea when we may have people who want some part-time employment in Olympia. I mean, maybe that's a spot for us to help work with, that some of the information that we want in the paper, we don't know what it's going to say, but we want it covered, that we need to do some ideas on this also. So what though else have you felt, or that you thought Nathan felt too, that League can do for the future of, let's say, newspapers traditionally, or at least the respect for tradition, and then toward other types of media? What should we do for you, Mark?
That's no easy question. You know, there's the obvious things where, you know, I could say subscribe and read us. Sounds like you all do. Telling your family and friends what they're missing if they don't read us. I mean, these are the obvious, simple things, but probably more importantly is finding a way to help us break down the stigmas related to news coverage, because it's not the stuff that you find on the internet for the most part, or on social media, and in some cases, on the national level. We all live here, we work here, we're part of the communities that we serve for the most part. So that we are locally owned. There's nobody pulling strings from a large corporation or hedge fund somewhere. This is all important to all of us at the paper. So if there's a way to disseminate that in some way to help people understand that I won't say it's different, because there's a lot of good news coverage that takes place all across the country, but that's the thing I think that many people are missing. They don't make that connection that we're right here. We're driving down the same tree toppled streets that you are, that sort of thing. We need to continue our watchdog role, and we're finding other ways, other business divisions that drive revenues to our company that help support us in that way. And Sue, finding some grant or some way to help with the Washington legislative coverage is not foreign to us. We're sharing, as I mentioned earlier, we're sharing our State House reporter with the costs with the NAMPA paper, and we are partnering with the Northwest Public Broadcasting for health coverage. So we share the cost of a health coverage reporter. So if there was a similar situation for the Washington side, I think that would be well received by us if there was a way to do that. I saw a hand, Robbie.
I'm sorry, Alex. I had my hand up first.
That's fine, Bobby, that's fine.
So you wanted a suggestion, and I agree with you that I really am not interested in reading the front page of what's going on in Miami, right? I mean, I want to know about if I'm reading my local newspaper, I want to read about local news. So I want to read about people's families. I want to read about their kids, besides just in the sports section. I mean, I want to read about events that are happening. I want to read about things I can get involved in. I just think if you guys want to become really strong, write about us and help us create events that people want to be part of something that's happening. So the newspaper needs to make Pullman a happening place. That's my comment.
Nice.
Thank you.
Alex,
You're on.
Oh, I'll just follow up with Bobby. I think almost all of you know from having heard the Spokesman Review is trying a formula like that. If you follow them at all, you'll recognize efforts to do that. I wanted to ask a couple of questions that are partially related. 360, that mechanism, could you talk to me about whether that's had any sort of impact on your revenue and on information kinds of materials? Because I use it all the time, and I think sometimes groups don't use it. But could you comment on that before my next question?
Yes. when we launched Inland 360, I wasn't back to the Tribune yet, so it precedes me this go around. I know that looking at some of the metrics that we use to track that, that we saw pretty significant growth in readership when it first came out because it was something new and people were craving that kind of information, the events, what books, the movies, that sort of thing, and the feature stories. Then it kind of plateaued to where the readership kind of stagnated on it. So I think it needs to go through, again, my personal opinion, it needs to go through a little bit of evolution and refresh itself in some way. I know there was some discussion about that a few months back, but then Jennifer Bauer left to go to work for the U of I and Mary Stone took it over. So she's probably still trying to get her legs on the publication. But it has been very popular for us. We distribute it separately from the newspaper in some locations. It's something that's news related, but completely outside of the mainstream. So it's, like I say, initially that was well received.
I had a partial other question. I did want to first reinforce something that Sue Hines implied, which is I've worked with organizations that often try to do notifications to papers. Far and away, we find the most success in actually doing a news release, which has got a lot of information in it, that the paper can, in fact, pick and choose how to direct it. I'll just stop with that. My more general question has to do with partially Bobby's point about local news. One of the entertaining things I find about the daily news and one of the most irritating things are your opinion pieces. Just curious about, and I will not mention Chuck Prochesky's name because this is very nonpartisan, but my question has to do with the general sort of policy of how the paper looks at its opinion pieces, because almost all of them are locally related, except when they borrow them, how they decide. Almost never do one find a piece that is so far over the mark that the paper will say anything. They tend to let other things and letters do it. Curious about how they see their opinion pieces and whether there's any way to, I will say, sort of improve them in a way that they're not just making splashy idiots of themselves. That would help circulation, because I think I'm just suspicious that often the people are there precisely to sell newspapers, and I think they're appalling, a lot of them. Thank you.
Alex, Chuck doesn't care. If he's an appalling, whatever.
I'm asking about the newspaper.
I know.
But Mark, it does show you that we're all reading the opinion pieces, even if we're growling all the way through them. And some of us on different ones, I'm sure. Folks, we do have to cut it off because it is 1 o'clock. I knew we wouldn't have enough time once we got going. And I think we picked up some ideas. Thank you, Mark, for what we need to turn in. We as a league were very concerned that we didn't think about this Palouse area, because a lot of the report, as you mentioned, is excellent. Is good research, honestly, amazing research.
Yes.
But it has to emphasize major newspapers, because that's what we have in the state. Not that they're, the super big ones, but when you look at it, we are really lucky with a very well-informed audience in the Palouse, and we have a local newspaper. Most of the areas don't have a paper our size, and I'm sure don't have the expectations we have. So we're already needing to be of a little more service than just a complaint bureau, which this group is not a complaint bureau. It would rather be a helpful on anything that keeps newspapers free, not free of charge, free of other things. We realize things must cost, and we want good reporters. and we want honest reporters and good columnists. And so we will continue to work on it. Mark, whatever you think we need to learn about and so on, I would love to have your opinions. I know we'll all get to talk to Nathan sometime when he's visiting. You've done us well today, Mark. I really thank you for stepping in and to let everyone know that the Alfords were very interested in joining us today, but they're on a learning conference. Lucky them, maybe in good weather, but I want to thank everybody. I will get back to the league with some ideas that I'd like to have each league member think about as we work out our answers to some very basic questions. And I'm not always a very good follower of directions, but I think we will have a number of ideas and hopes that the league at the state level will look at with our summaries and so on, with our consensus. So let me say thank you. Mark, if you have anything else to say, but please pass on my husband's good results with your reporter at Boise. We're just going to have to find one for Olympia.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I know
Thank you, Mark.
I know I'm the third wheel here with Nathan and Craig traveling, but I really enjoyed today's exchange.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.